Okay. Well, for people who are joining this live stream, this is one of our series of language completeness and consistency meetings about Wolfram language features. All right, let's start off first thing here. Okay, this has to do with the epilogue of graphics and whether there should be a 3D analog of epilogue. So do we have Brett here?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, epilogue is, these are ancient creatures.
Well, it's not just ancient creatures. I mean, there's a reason for those two examples there, which is to make sure we all understand what they're actually for.
Okay. So what coordinate system does it use in 3D?
It's a scale 0-1 system in 2D.
I see, on the image,
mm-hmm.
Right.
Which is useful, no question. I mean, there's nothing wrong with what it's doing right now.
Right. So the purpose of epilogue is to draw something on top of your image, and prologue is something below your image. And this is the same in 2D and 3D. Now in 2D, right, you have layers, and 3D you have a three-dimensional coordinate system, but prologue and epilogue are always all the way above or all the way below.
I see. So your point is in 3D, above and below are just, you just throw in various 3D primitives and they'll be where it is.
Right.
Right. I suppose using a sphere as opposed to a cylinder or something wasn't necessarily the best choice there. But
okay, but the main point that Bob is making here is that for list point plot 3D, that's the issue. Okay, so the issue is
how to add to the scene.
Right. Now, I mean, arguably, I don't quite understand why we're not just using. Okay, so let's imagine we do this. Okay, and now we say show that like sphere. Oh, we can't do that, can we? We have to say graphics 3D.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say sphere, 50, 50, 50, comma 30. Now, is that going to work?
Yep.
Yes. So what the heck's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it per se. I mean, I think where people get confused are people who, think of epilogue as a way to, right, people who come from plot where you can just add something using epilogue, and in 3D you have to go use show.
Yeah, right.
Which is I personally have been slightly annoyed by this, right? Because you need to go back.
Well, it's okay. So the choice would be to have an epilogue 3D.
Right. But I think that would only make sense as an option to viz functions, not as an option
I agree.
to 3D.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, graphics 3D, it's kind of a no-op. It's just like it could be append to the list.
Right, except graphics 3D by itself doesn't evaluate.
No, I understand that. But I mean, it will be equivalent to put an epilogue 3D in there would be, I mean, unfortunately, these names are awfully generic, but well, the epilogue 3D is not as generic a name. But so the idea then would be, in this case here, and I don't think this is totally stupid at all, would be to have an epilogue 3D arrow, like, let's say, sphere scaled. Something like this. Right?
Right.
I mean, I don't think that's objectionable. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of asymmetric that we don't have a prologue 3D because obviously we don't need it.
Well, I mean, to some extent, it's not really epilogue either. Right? It's some extra content.
Well, you could append that content to the list of primitives that you have. And in that sense, it's an epilogue.
I mean, but you could prepend just as easily and
get the same result.
Yes.
I'm aware.
Right, but my point is, I think the way, right, I mean, we would need John Folter, somebody from the front-end team, if we actually wanted to change graphics 3D. I mean, as an option to visualizations functions, right, we just, we just put it in the graphics 3D. We effectively do the show for the user and stick it in the graphics 3D.
Yep.
An option to graphics 3D directly, then we have to think about what exactly are we doing with this thing.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody's going to look for it there. I mean, I think that as a practical matter, adding it to the visualization functions is a reasonable thing to do.
I agree.
I'd rather add it to graphics 3D.
Well, you can negotiate with John what you want to do with that.
I hope that was appropriate.
You two might be able to do this. Okay, in any case, all right, fine. So can we agree on this? I think
is that the name that we?
I think it's the name we should use, because I think anything else that says sort of extra graphics or something like this, it's just going to be totally confusing. And I think what people are looking for is an analog of epilogue.
Right, because I certainly use epilogue much more than you use prologue in your plot commands, because you want to draw things on top of the plot you've just created.
Right.
So in that sense, having an epilogue 3D.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that image 3D could eventually support an epilogue 3D as well.
Yeah, probably.
And I assume that the geographics functions support epilogue right now.
Yes, because they just inherit from graphics.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, fine. I think this is reasonable. Let's do it.
I have a question about coordinate systems. So because the visualization functions use scaling functions, which coordinate system is this size that you put at the end, the 20?
This is just going to be thrown into the list of graphics primitives. So whatever coordinate system the list of graphics primitives thinks it's in, that's where it'll be in.
Right. Which is another thing that surprises people, because right in the 2D case, right, it is using the same coordinate system as the plot, whereas in 3D it's the scaled 0-1 coordinate system.
Right, which is a reason to have an epilogue 3D, which people will find if they're looking for this kind of behavior.
But that's referring to the center of the sphere, not the radius of the sphere. I was asking about the radius of the sphere. That 20 is...
What's wrong with that? I mean, it just gets thrown into the list of graphics.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, so if you look at, like, say, log plot, Jose.
Right.
The coordinate system is the log scaled one.
Okay.
Sort of epilogue and prologue are the sort of very low level-y sorts of things.
So after taking the logarithms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so actually what do epilogue and prologue do with log plot? And do you need to take the logs yourself, or is it going to transform them?
You need to take the logs yourself.
Really?
Yeah. That is really how it works right now.
Did you think about that? Because it seems crazy to me. So the coordinate system is, well, I guess it's not crazy given the craziness of the epilogue in a 3D graphic, which is just saying to heck with the coordinate system, with the user coordinate system in the graphic, it's just going to use a 0-1 coordinate system. Right?
Right. But so in graphics, the coordinate systems are, I think, completely different for epilogue and prologue. Because if you want the scaled, then you have to explicitly use scaled, and
What are you saying here? So let's see. You know, it's crazy that we don't reproduce all of the things here. We really should do that.
You mean have all of options graphics?
Yes.
There's some crazy stuff in options graphics.
Yes, and it makes for some pretty long tables, although I suppose there are pluses and minuses to both.
Yeah, I was going to say there's probably a third of options of graphics that I don't even ever use.
Well, that's a separate discussion. Maybe you could look at that, Brett, and maybe we could at least bring in the ones, because I mean, clearly here, whatever, if there is a weird behavior of epilogue, it is certainly not documented here.
Right.
And in his defense, if you have like date list plot, the dates are what, Unix time, and that's not obvious either. Like any different coordinate system, like dates is going to be confusing as well.
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, with respect to epilogue, you're saying?
Yeah, like if you wanted to use epilogue with like a dated plot, for example, I think, what do you have to do? I think you have to use...
yeah, well, so it doesn't even document epilogue in the options here.
Mm-hmm. There might be something under possible issues. I don't remember if that got added or not. Probably not, but... I mean, on the other hand, you have functions like pie chart and bar chart where, you know, the coordinate system in one or both directions is, you know, sort of philosophically non-existent, or at least non-quantitative.
Yes, but then there's a, right, but by the way, Sushma, if you could report the stupid bug that those parens are too big there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, so what is your basic point here? So your point is that epilogue, for something like a bar chart, epilogue is just punting to treating that as a 0-1 coordinate system. Is that correct?
No. That the visualization functions just pass that to graphics. And so whatever is the actual coordinate system of the graphics produced, not of the tick marks, but of the graphics, is what you need to be in.
What? So wait a second. So if I say pie chart...
Well, so do date list plot of something.
Well, I was going to do this. Let me do this. Epilogue, is this going to be crazy? So if I say epilogue disk, 1.5, 1.5.
It's going to put it where you would expect.
Where that's the 0, 0 of the coordinate system.
And that pie chart has radius 1.
Okay. Where does it ever say that in the pie chart documentation?
It doesn't.
Does it say it in the epilogue documentation?
I'm sure it doesn't.
Brilliant. Okay.
Well, I mean, so the thing is like pie chart, I think hasn't ever changed, but the X coordinate system in bar chart has adjusted, a little bit over the years.
George on the live stream is pointing out the role of, we know that the role of, yes, the role of epilogue is to put things in the 2D coordinate system. And I think what we're concluding here is that, I mean, okay, what about a 3D graphic, like a bar chart 3D? Yeah, I mean, look, basically first point is, clearly it needs to be documented what coordinate system epilogue is actually using in these different things. I mean, presumably if I do a show, But what happens if I do a show with the pie chart here?
I mean, right. So, I mean, I would claim it is documented in the sense that, right, it's, the ref page for pie chart says it has the same options and graphics with the following changes. Since epilogue is not listed there, that means it treats it exactly the same as if you did show.
Yeah, but where does it say what the coordinate system of the pie chart is?
Well, that it doesn't say. But my claim,
but that's not epilogue's job.
That's not epilogue's job.
No, I agree. But pie chart could say what its coordinate system is, which is relevant also for this show I just did.
Correct.
Right. Although, I mean, the coordinate system for pie chart is arbitrary.
Yeah, but it's something definite.
So, I mean, my concern is documenting something that down the line we suddenly have some, real reason for wanting to change.
I think we should think through what they all are. Why don't we inventory what they are and see whether we feel embarrassed by any of them? I don't feel embarrassed by a pie chart going from 0, 0 at center to being a radius 1 pie chart. That doesn't seem embarrassing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see whether they're all as unembarrassing as that. And if so, I think
so for example, Stephen.
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 examples. So going back to, say, date list plot, where right now the x coordinate is absolute time.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I don't know what it should be, but it shouldn't be that.
It should be something that's on a much more reasonable scale of 0 to 1 or Unix time or something that, isn't in billions or whatever.
Well, okay, so that's a good question. What is the absolute graphics coordinate system of date list plot as opposed to what? So here's another question. Date list plot is an example of something where we need epilogue 3D-like behavior. So, for example, on a date list plot, if you wanted to put an arrow to a particular date, how would you do it? That's where you want essentially a contextual epilogue that just throws, graphics primitives into the, how do I do? If I just have graphics where I've got, now to, let's say I have something like this. Now to, let's say, how about day range?
Date, okay, yeah.
Now plus, oops. Now plus 2 weeks. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to take those, let's say I just do a, let's do this. Transpose, right. Okay, so now I can do a date list plot on that.
Mm-hmm.
And now what I want to know is how do I insert an extra data point here in that date list plot? Get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. So right now, if you do epilogue, then you would have to invoke
It's absolutely loony. Yeah, it's absolutely loony. I mean, what epilogue should do in this case is I should be able to say point, and then I should be able to say now 6 or something, and that's just going to go bonkers, isn't it? Not going to go bonkers. Why didn't that go bonkers?
Actually, I think date list plot, I think Darren put in code that does the translation.
Okay.
But I don't know how comprehensive it is.
Okay, so let me understand. If I do a show
polygon around a point or something.
Hold on. Well, let's do let's do this instead of that. Let's do regular polygon.
But it should have been placed on the vertical of the 0 of the first point, right?
Yes, it's in the wrong place.
So no, it isn't, Jose.
Right.
Because we're mostly through today.
Oh yeah, right.
It's today versus now.
Oh, it's today versus now. Yes. Okay, fine.
How do I do this? Is this?
Isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
Radius, centers, yeah, and then there's a radius, and then there's a number of sides.
Good luck with that radius.
I know. That's my point. I mean, 10 to the 6, and then we'll do number of sides. Okay. So this radius is a big crapshoot.
I mean, so just for fun, can you try offset of 5? I don't know whether regular polygon.
What on earth is this doing? What's this doing here?
Well, horizontally is in seconds.
Polygon, and the aspect ratio is very different between the two axes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is completely crazy.
Right, although it's not obvious what the non-crazy version is.
Yeah. Okay, but so what we're doing in 3D graphics is we're just saying Epilogue has a 0-1 coordinate system.
No, it's using the actual do range of %138 or options of %138 plot range.
But wait, what are you trying to do?
138's the data.
Oh,
you mean
140. Well, 140.
%140, what do you want to do? Plot range.
Yep.
I think you want absolute options. No? Oh. Ugh. Gosh.
See, that's our plot range. So any regular polygon is going to look not very regular.
No, I understand.
And that's
so,
what
Jose, in the case of geographics, what would the analogous thing look like there? So if I do geographics.
Well, the geographics case is simpler for 2 reasons. First, the 2 dimensions are always the same thing. It's distances on the Earth, slightly deformed by projections, but they are not completely 2 different things like here. And the second thing is that the projections have a reference model allowing to set a scale. So depending on the projection, that's going to...
so what is that? Is that lat longs?
In this case, this is long lat.
Okay, but why, if that doesn't correspond, is that, I see, but there could be, this thing is sliced to be rectangular, even though the projection with that lat long may not be a rectangular region.
No. So if you have a geographics or this, and you ask for the geo range, you get through lat long. If you ask for the plot range, you will get the projected coordinates, which depend on the projection. In this case, it's Mercator projection, so you are getting longitudes.
Okay, so hold on. If I say geo range of what?
No, options, %148 geo range. Right. So there you are getting latitudes, yes, and then longitudes. In the first case with plot range, because this is a Mercator projection, you are getting longitudes, which are identical, and then the Mercator latitudes, which are always a bit larger than the original ones.
What do you mean by Mercator latitude? What's that?
So Mercator, the vertical axis of, do a geographics world.
Yeah. In my opinion, it's better to not think of that, 56.99 in out 149 as a latitude. It's a projected coordinate that is parallel to latitudes.
Yeah, I think geographics.
I want to do something much more unreasonable. Okay, I want to do this. And I never tried something like this.
Geographics and show, yes, we have to, it will reproduce geographics. We'll do another geographics.
What is this? What on earth is this? Some weird thing off the coast of, is this off the coast of Africa? Because it's...
Yes.
That's just crazy.
Why isn't it using the range / the plot range or geo range of the first one, given that...
That's what I was just wondering.
Yes, well, I mean, that's what I would expect it to do.
Right. If you'd had it in the opposite order, I would have expected something sort of like this.
Yeah, right.
But
Right.
Well, show with geographics, because in general, it's designed to take two geographics of two different regions. It will basically ignore the geo ranges, and it will take the inputs and compute a new geographics.
But why isn't it including Luxembourg?
I don't know.
bug report.
Yeah. So what is this going to do? Is that going to show Luxembourg and New York and Paris?
I am expecting it will show a big chunk of the world, yeah. That's independent. I don't know. Yeah.
Where's Luxembourg?
Yeah,
it's there. I see it.
Yeah,
I know where it is in terms of, yeah, it is there. It's orange. What is that? Is that some server problem again?
No, sometimes it happens that this is the retry we were discussing. It tried to get to download a tile. It couldn't, but it retried. And then it has succeeded, apparently, because I don't see any tile missing here.
Yeah, right. Okay, so this worked. Okay, so we've got some funkiness here. Look, the basic bottom line is, what is the okay, so first question is, what is the raw graphics coordinate system of some of these more derived plots, okay, of which dateless plot is clearly kind of crazy. You know, this one is at least sober, I would say, what its actual, you know, and we should probably document what the actual graphics coordinate system, except Brett is saying let's not document it because we don't actually, you know, we're not really committing to it. And this case,
I'm talking about for some of the things. I mean, like that GeoList plot, the coordinate system is completely
it's well understood.
Yeah,
well understood.
We document well in all about coordinate systems.
Look, the funky case is the dateless plot case. And
if you do plot, well, does plot support scaling functions? I forget if you support scaling functions, right? But then once you support scaling, add and scaling functions, then the coordinate systems get all very counterintuitive.
Well, I think what Brett was saying is that it works like in geographics, which is the important coordinate systems at the end is the one of the projected space. Right? Of the after you have taken the logarithm, or in geo after you have projected.
I think I came across some case where that was not true, but maybe that was just a bug.
Okay, so listen, I think bottom line here is we need to do some investigation, and Brett should get somebody in his team to look at this, of what the actual coordinate systems are for these various kinds of graphics, which, for example, in the case of dateless plot, it looks just fairly nutty.
Well, I mean, with date list plot, we need to have some one-dimensional description of the axis, and absolute time has always been and still is what we use internally in many places, including time series, for example.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not crazy. I mean, given that we're going to do this, it's, I mean, look, the fact that it's January 0th, 1900 or something it's relative to?
Yeah, exactly. And it has been like that all the time in the Wolfram language.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so can I say two things? And hopefully they're, I mean, so on one hand, you know, if we come back to this option that we came up with of Epilog 3D.
Yep.
I mean, I'm wondering whether it isn't more interesting to try to come up with the more general.
Yeah, I agree.
Add something.
Just adds in,
and then we document that this option adds elements to the scene and
pre-transformation elements. So that means if it's a scaling function thing, then it's going to add elements that are
we take care of the transforms.
Yeah, which means that in the case of dateless plot, we are assuming that the x coordinates are time values, etc.
but an absolute time is a time value as well.
But it's not necessarily the only time value that you're interested in.
Sure. I mean, I fully agree that you should support date object, like we do support entities and geoposition.
State objects.
Right. That doesn't solve the problem of what happens when you combine with show, this thing with its wacky coordinate system. I mean, the other thing that we're not doing here is show. We could imagine a form of show, which is basically the inset story, which just combines things assuming 0-1 coordinate systems.
Right.
In other words, what we need is it's more like an overlay than a show. And we have an overlay, in fact, but it does something somewhat different. But I mean, that's the question is if we were to have a version of a conforming show where the thing just assumes scaled coordinate or scaled show or something.
Isn't that what inset is for?
Well, that's what I just said. Yeah, I think it is. Right. I mean, inset, it takes the same ordering. I wonder if we document that very clearly with, and I wonder if this is impossible issues for things like dateless plot and so on. All right, look, I agree that I think we should come up with a more general, but as soon as we have an extra elements thing, the question is, are they epilogue elements or prologue elements?
Epilogue.
Because that's more useful because it's on top.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so what will we call it? Extra. I mean, there's always things like epilogue elements, but I don't like that very much.
Addendum?
I think addendum sounds way too textual.
Probably. Markup?
Well, plot annotations would be one thing, but I think that might be confusing. I mean, it's not plot annotation suggests a use for these, which is not necessarily actually plot additions or plot extras, plot label, plot additions. It's not terrible.
Plot additions I like better than extras.
Yeah. And we've got plot range. We've got plot. I think plot additions is a reasonable idea.
Yeah, I like it. And it makes it clear that this isn't a graphics option, but a visualization option.
Yes, that's true too.
Right. So the other thing that I was going to mention, if you recall, I said two things.
Yeah.
The other is that, I mean, conceivably at some point way down the line, I could imagine plot returning things that are in where the coordinate system under the hood used by plot is 0-1 or some other completely arbitrary scale. And the reason for this is that right now, sort of plot does the natural thing that it's done for 30 years or whatever. But this means that if you have things that are beyond 10 to the 300 or whatever, that start going numbers that are beyond the scale of machine numbers, that you run into issues with the drawing layers at the OS level, and things become unrepresentable.
That is a weird problem.
It is a weird problem, but people run into it every so often because you have mathematical functions that get up that big, and then the plot behaves weirdly. And so I could imagine the point down the road where
we're not going to change the coordinate system for plots for everything and make show not work for the sake of people who want to plot things that are bigger than machine numbers.
Right. So what would frame true do? I mean, what would be the ticks? Would you show in the ticks 0 to 1 or the actual
numbers? Ticks would be 10 to 1,000,000 or whatever.
Okay, but it's not 1,000,000. It's 10 to the 300. You said 10 to the 308. I would guess
10 to the million is larger than 10 to the 308.
10 to the million. Okay.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that case is totally crazy. And I think that case should be handled in some different and much hackier way. Because what that's doing is that the difficulty there is the drawing layer can't handle those absolute coordinates. And I think the right answer to that is probably the first answer is wait until the drawing layer can do it and let the user rescale it until that time. It sounds like a deeply corner case.
Actually, I should take another look at one of those examples, because it's possible that scaling functions should already be able to work for it.
Oh, that would be interesting, that it will automatically, that the scaling...
Well, I mean, not necessarily automatically, but like right now, if you specify a scaling function, it's just a rescale, just a straight linear...
No, I understand that, but I'm suggesting that in order to protect against badness down the, in the rendering pipeline, that you basically just pull back on, if you discover that you're going to blow out the rendering pipeline, then you automatically do the rescaling.
Mm-hmm.
Which you could do with scaling function arrow automatic, which we don't really want to set, but it could be that's sort of some kind of panic scaling function, which maybe could be controlled by some method option. I think it's better to panic and do the right thing, so to speak, in terms of what appears. Clearly, it will do the wrong thing if you were to say show a 10 to the 400 and a 10 to the 500 graphic together, and you did the rescale.
Right.
Then you'll just get the wrong answer. But what's going to happen here? This will be a bug, and that's better than that the thing just blows out the rendering pipeline and just produces something stupid, in the actual rendering layer in the OS.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would do for that. Okay, plot addition seems like a good idea. Let's work through it, see whether we can make that work. Okay, I want to get on to my next topic, which is a lovely function that I know everybody is going to attack. But anyway.
We have our arsenal ready.
Okay, so there's a function. It's not going to be called arf.
We wanted to call it arf. Can we call it
arf is kind of cute.
Yes, it is.
Alf, like the like the 80s Alien.
I don't even. Okay, let me explain what this is for. Okay, so the issue is, if you're trying to write a transposition sort function, or in general, this is a, what is this? This is a bunch of exchanges to make. So what this is doing is, it's taking the elements in a list, the elements in a list at specified positions, and it is applying this function to that list of elements, and then sticking the results from that function, which must have the same cardinality, so to speak, as the original element list, and putting it back in the positions of the original element list. Did that make any sense to anybody?
So I guess one thing that's not entirely clear to me is, are we saying cardinality or shape? I'm not.
No, I'm saying yes. It's got to be the same shape. So this is the thing that the way it has to work. Okay, what is this for? This is for, so you understood this use case, right? And this also comes up in the quantum circuits case, that essentially we're dealing with 2-to-2 functions here, right? And that's not what we're normally dealing with. Something like, applying a function f, it can be applied to many arguments, but it's always going to return one thing. This is dealing with at least a simple case of knitting in a function that has multiple outputs, multiple return values. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether there are other cases. I mean, what would be other things that we can imagine doing with functions with multiple return values? I mean, this one is basically, you've got an existing thing, a list, and certain positions in that list, you are pulling out You're doing something to them and you're sticking stuff back in there. Now, I mean, in a sense, things like, I mean, I don't know whether I don't ever use this, but I mean, we have this very neat capability that you can say, you know, xy equals yx to swap the values of x and y, right? That is essentially doing a parallel assignment. And what this is doing is it's kind of a parallel, you know, it's some kind of parallel apply.
I think a good example here is the function accumulate. It takes a list and returns a different list. And therefore, we could say, if I have a range of 10, how do I accumulate the first 3 elements and put them back?
I see what you're saying.
So with your function arf accumulate 1 to 3 of range 10?
Yeah, that's what it would do.
Exactly.
Right. But I mean, the point, actually, no, it's not what it would do. It won't work because notice that accumulate of 1, 2, 3 is, oh yeah, no, it's a 3-element list.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's clear if you evaluate your definition of arf and apply it on some longer.
Actually, Sander on our live stream is asking, why is this function not the equivalent of this? And the answer is it is, basically. It's a functional equivalent of that.
Yes, this would be for one-dimensional cases. Yes, it would be.
Right. I mean, that is certainly a clear way to say it, that it is the functional equivalent of that. So the question now is, what would you call, I mean, what we're trying to do is have something which does not require you to name expa.
Right.
Right. So we're trying to back out. Yeah, that's a really good observation. Thank you. Okay, so now the question would be, and so Jose has pointed out correctly that pos should be able to be something which isn't just a one-dimensional sequence of things like this, but can be, for example, well, some kind of 2D specification. I'm not quite sure what that. I think
there are examples. If you see the examples at the end, I think it will be clear. So we start with this array, this matrix of ones, and now we want to accumulate the diagonal, for example, or one column.
Yes, right. And so what you're doing there is you're giving a list of the positions, pairs, for example. Right. Yeah. Okay. Fine. That's a consistent thing to do.
Yeah, it would be great to have their band and things like that.
Yes. Okay, so the question before us is, what should we call this function? So what we've got, you know,
it's some sort of position map.
No, because we don't really have, it's not like map because it isn't
per element.
Right. It's not per element. It takes a whole gulp.
Yes. But yes, I was trying to abstract out the position list.
Okay, so what this thing looks like, makes it look like, is it's more like it's not really a replace, it's an apply.
Part apply, position apply.
But it's
I don't like apply.
Exactly.
No, it's not an apply.
Exactly. It's not replacing any head.
Well, I guess that's true.
Rewrite.
Sandra on our live stream is making a comment that I don't fully understand. The at equals operator would make this easy. What is? Yeah.
Right.
I think he's still thinking about the L value version of the function.
Yeah, right. Yes, no, actually, okay. Yes, I mean, we're trying to avoid an L value.
Right.
Because in order to have, the whole point is to have a functional version of this where you don't have to name the construct that you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We had been thinking about the reset part, which would do what he wants. Yeah.
Yes, I understand. I mean, right. This is, yes, right. This is some kind of
optimized.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to this. What we're really trying to do is, okay. So let's understand what are some other assignment-y things. So, for example, replace part is a famous example. Is the simpler version of this, right? Replace part says take part number 2 and replace it with X. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is doing something a little bit like replace part.
Yeah, it's a pity that replace part, if we can say 2,3 goes to X. Well, actually, list 2, list 3.
Yeah,
if this
that.
Exactly. And if this was able to accept a list XY on the left, we would be almost there.
On the right, you mean?
On the right, exactly. Sorry, on the right, instead of X.
Because we need to be able to replace it with a list.
Exactly, yes. That's what I mean, that if we put a list here, XY, it will put 2 lists instead of the base BC.
That it doesn't thread.
Exactly.
Threaded replace part?
Say again?
Threaded replace part?
I don't think it's a replace because it's a function application.
Right. I wonder whether this is a sequence belongs to the sequence family. Sequence something.
Why?
Because it's extracting a sequence of elements, doing something with them, and putting them back.
It's not a sequence, actually. Well, it's a list. We're kind of eliding that issue.
Yes, but in the sequence family, we are also working with lists.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, so I had this crazy name like path applied. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that, right? F is a univariate function. It's a univariate function of some list, but it's still a univariate function.
Yes. Okay, so let's look at these names that were here. So, okay, I think we all agree what the function is supposed to do. Now we just need a name that isn't completely obscure. Okay, so how would you explain to somebody what this function does?
It extracts elements, transforms them, and puts them back.
Right.
Yeah, so except that description makes no sense to me because if I extract, the top left corner, the bottom right corner, something that's 3 rows down and 2 over, I don't understand what it means to extract and put them back. At least not if you're applying to them.
I don't understand. You're putting them back in the same positions. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So you're only what does it mean to put them in the same position? So you're saying, see, this is where I get confused because if you have I thought you're taking sort of multiple things and trying to do something with them.
Yes, we're taking multiple things like positions 7, 8, and 9. Okay. Or 7, 9, and 14. Okay.
Okay.
And
I think, Stephen, if you copy the definition that there is at the end, the one I gave is a bit simplified with respect to yours. No, a bit up there. This ARF pos. I think that explains what we are doing, which is exactly what the 3 steps of Brett.
Yes. Sandra is suggesting apply part. It's also pointing out that it's, related to map at, but it's on the entire thing.
Modify at. I'm just looking at examples of this in other libraries and what they're called, but I can't. I mean, as I pointed out in the email, this isn't exactly new. There are libraries that do things like this in other programming languages.
There's never anything new under the sun.
Yeah, kind of. And I mean, we could try to look for. Unfortunately, when I look at like those libraries, they tend to have really short, terse, or just symbolic looking names for this.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. I mean, if somebody had come up with a brilliant name, it would be good. But if they haven't, I wouldn't count on.
Update part?
No, it's too generic sounding. I mean, a modifier isn't right either because it's not.
I'll suggest transmute again.
Oh gosh, no.
So would a slightly longer version of what Brett said be it extracts certain parts, eats them in a list, and then puts them back in the corresponding position?
Yeah, that's correct. That's what it's doing. We just don't have anything with names like modify, because modify suggests in-place modification, which this is not.
Right.
I mean,
rearrange.
It's not. It's no guarantee that the things stay anything like the same.
Yeah.
So, okay, so the one question is it the curried form that we primarily emphasize? Or do we give, in your version here, right, we could also give your arf pos, f pos expa, possibly, or even f expa pos.
I think we can have both, yeah, like map at.
So map at, so this would be the uncurried form.
Right.
F expa pos.
Yep.
So let's see if we can name that.
This is so similar to map at.
Would this be compose at?
Interesting. What does that mean?
Right, so compose of fx gives you f of x. So...
And reconstruct at.
I mean, isn't that construct? What is the difference between...
The compose is solely univariate.
I thought compose had been deprecated.
Yes, that's why we introduced construct. So compose did two things. One is composition, the other is construct.
Right. If you did compose FGX, you would see the difference.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was the confusion with compose, that it was doing two very different things at the same time.
Right. But now in this case,
I mean, the reason why compose is better than construct is that it's right. It's not vararg, right? It takes one list and spits out another list.
Yeah, right. I know, but I still think compose suggests something. Look, what this is. I mean, the terms that would come to mind are in-place modification, perhaps.
That sounds like an L value thing.
I know it's way wrong. But those are the terms if you start trying to explain it to somebody. Let me see. Okay, I had some crazy ideas over here, like multi-part curry.
So what would be the version of this that doesn't use positions? In the same way that we have map and map at? If we try to remove the positions, what would it be?
Well, we can't do that because we couldn't have a curried form then.
No, I'm trying to find the name, a simpler name. So is this like construct at?
Why is it construct at all? Because it's actually running the function in a sense and then putting the results back.
Reconstruct at.
Compromise of 1880 at.
I mean, a very ridiculous name would be something like replace thread extract. It's absolutely incomprehensible. Absolutely incomprehensible. The problem is it's really not a map because it's only doing it once. You're right. That makes it more like a construct.
So if instead of pause we have all, what's that action? It means F is acting on the whole expression.
Yes.
Which is exactly what construct does, which is F on that expression. It's just that this expression happens to be.
Hold on. What do you say? What are you claiming here? So you're saying that I don't think that's correct, is it?
So imagine that pause is all.
Okay, let's do a specific case. Okay, yeah. So let's do this. And you say arf pause. Unfortunately, we have to have it actually return. Let's use accumulate as the function here.
Yeah.
It's got to return something of the same length.
Yeah. So accumulate of all and then range 10. And why is it all? Oh, struct all doesn't work.
Okay, all right. So we could say range of 10 there.
Do you need the list? List mapped, yeah. Exactly. So that's equivalent to accumulate of range 2. So construct of accumulate comma range 2.
10.
Yeah. Sorry.
I say you've been reading too much binary.
Yeah.
Too many.
Okay. So
in a sense, we are adding the at to this operation.
You're right. Wow, that's pretty funky and weird. Okay, so let's imagine, what does construct even say in its documentation? That's very minimal.
That's very precise.
I guess one question which would occur to me if we call this a construct that is there some version where it, where it's vararg, where
done. What does the vararg thing mean? Because the vararg thing, the point is it is picking up. I'm still confused about why this even works. Okay, so you're saying here, if I say arf pause here, and this thing here is the list just 4, 5, 6.
With additional lists. It has to be a position spec, not a part spec.
Okay, but I don't agree with that design. I mean, I think that it should be.
Well, the problem is that then we cannot use it in matrices, for example.
Yes, we can. We just have to do the other case. We look, the matrix case, look, we can perfectly well have lists I1, I2, I3. Okay, and if you want to use it, I think we should make the matrix case require I1, J1, I2, J2, etc. See what I'm saying? We really have to have this case work. This case is going to be the very basic case. And realistically, you never want just a single one of these, right? You're always wanting multiple things. So you're always going to want the outer list. Otherwise, why would you do this? You would just use map at. If you just want, well, not even map at, you would just use, if you just want one element, yes, you're effectively doing map at.
We can do that. It's just that it's not exactly what extract does, because extract with a list.
I know.
Is
So I'm okay. Fine. I'm not, but I'm not arguing for it to be exactly extract. I think it needs to be this.
Okay.
But the question is, then, what does this do? What is the way to think about this? So this is taking those arguments. Somebody, Hans Michel on the live stream suggests partial derangement. Yeah. Yep. That's that's way off in the math. Transformat. Yeah. Unfortunately, transformat is just too general sounding. I mean, it's a very specific thing. It's applies the function, gets back a result of the same shape, sticks the things back.
So in that thing that's highlighted, then we're going to sequencize those inner lists? Or am I not understanding?
What do you mean? That's a position spec. It's like a list of positions in a matrix.
Yeah. It's a list of 2D positions.
Yeah.
So that if this thing here is, yeah, so someone's asking, why not have the option to return the result somewhere else on the list? No, I don't think so. Because I think as soon as you do that, well, I did think about that, actually. I did think about that. I think it becomes too incredibly weird in that case. I mean, you could imagine something where you say, pick the thing up. So let's say, I mean, that would in principle be possible.
Well,
you could do that with a rule syntax. Yeah.
It would be like a reinsert.
Reinsert, you said.
Yeah.
Okay, does this work with insert? Is there a way to do this with insert? Can you say...
we would have to delete first. We would have to...
Oh, no, that was too horrible, right.
Yeah.
But that's why replace part is the right thing.
Right.
When this is brought up in tutorials, at least in the tutorials that I read in functional programming in the libraries, it's almost always brought up as a way to like mock state, right? Which is why I think my original suggestion was not map. I'm sorry, what was it?
Modify it.
Modify.
You can't say that because
it's not actually modifying anything, right? I get it, but
then you shouldn't call it modify if it isn't modifying anything. But I take your point. I mean, it's
the basic use that this function has in these libraries as it's introduced is to just emulate a function that changes.
Of course.
Right. The point I was making earlier about the nested list, right? Now you have something that's neither a part spec nor a position spec, neither a part spec nor an extract spec, right?
I know.
Well, I mean, I think we have enough confusion between those two that we shouldn't introduce a third thing.
Yeah, but I think there's no choice because these are the two use cases that we care about are, this function is a little bit different in the way that it works. Let's not address that for a second, okay? Mm-hmm. I think that one is I think there really isn't a hell of a lot of choice there, but I think the real question is how to think about this thing. And I agree, actually. Okay, so let's consider the more extreme case. Okay, here's a more extreme case. Oh boy. Let's imagine this case here. Let's imagine that function f is actually a 2-to-1 function. Why not allow that?
We could, yeah.
Okay.
I still think this is a reconstruct add with a reconstruct add.
That's interesting. Reconstruct add is very interesting. That's interesting. That's the first one of these that actually doesn't seem totally crazy to me.
Because I still see it very related to MapAt, to construct, and it has the re to reiterate the fact that you are coming back to the same expression.
Yeah, on the live stream, someone with handle John Malkovich suggests a rewrite list. Rewrite is just not a word we've used. Rewrite. See, the problem is neither reconstruct nor rewrite. I like the re, but neither reconstruct nor rewrite. I understand that construct reminds one of the construct function that we have.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's just summarize what we look. Reconstruct at is the least crazy one that I think so far. It's a very weird though. If you saw that in a piece of code, go ahead.
I mean, the two arguments are the same. So it's f, expression, and the at the end represents the third argument, which is a position spec, like MapAt and replace part.
Yeah, I understand. The concern is the reconstruct.
Right.
I wonder about rewrite at.
Yep.
It's interesting.
And reconstruct almost makes it sound like it's broken.
Well,
or that you're getting it in a torn apart state.
Someone is just joining the discussion, is asking us what we're talking about. We'll summarize just for a second. This is a function that is, well, let's see if we can describe what it does. Function that collects elements from a list, transforms them, and then puts them back where they were. For example, in a sorting network, it can take this list of this, it could take elements 4 and 9 and apply the sort function to elements 4 and 9, putting those back in the list. Honestly, rewrite at is not totally stupid. I think, Sandra is suggesting change at. The problem with rewrite at, the difficulty that I have with it is it doesn't quite suggest that you are that's kind of interesting. I mean, it doesn't quite give primacy to the f function, which is doing the rewriting.
Yeah.
In other words, if you see that it's saying rewrite, by the way, Sushma, do I have a file where I'm storing stuff about this function or not?
Not yet.
I was going to say you only sent email about it, late last week or something?
Yeah, but I think I sent it. I don't think it came from a meeting. So, of course, I don't have a name for it. So where on earth are we going to put it?
It's going to be another 10 minutes figuring out what to name the file.
Why don't we call it ARF for now?
Do we have a generic place for ILD functions?
We usually put things in miscellaneous, or if you want to use language functions here.
Let's put it in miscellaneous.
Okay.
And let's put it under off because we kind of know what that is for now.
Okay. Yeah.
I was looking at other write functions we have. They're all quite different.
Yes, I agree.
Quiet, Jose.
What's that?
I was telling Jose to be quiet. We're getting close to a name.
Yeah, but okay. But we've also got some. I like the idea of re something or other because I think that that's good.
Recombine at?
No. Apply at. It's being suggested here, but I don't think. I thought about apply at. The problem with apply at is it's not doing an apply, because apply does this, and this is just doing this.
Yes.
And I like the re because it's taking the output.
And that thing that you wrote in 169 is what we call construct.
I know.
What about recombine positions?
Somebody is suggesting reapply at. No. What are you suggesting? I don't know why you like combine, because it's not really combining.
Well, you're taking multiple elements, you're applying a function to them, and then you're, sticking them where they were and where those things. So you're taking some combination of these elements and using it to fill in those slots.
Remix?
No, these you guys are getting. I mean, so on the live stream, Nitra is suggesting replant, which is we've had some of our sow and reap, or some of our. That one was a nod to the cornfields of Illinois, I think. And actually, those are good names, sow and reap. I like sow and reap, but we certainly considered that a moment of agriculturalism. I think. Okay, but let's summarize what the function is supposed to do. Okay, so this function, we'll call it R for the time being, of f, comma, expr, comma, pos. Well, it's a list of positions, P1, P2, P3. What does that do? We would normally say applies f, even though it's not in the formal sense, applies f to the list of elements P1, P2 of, elements.
I would say of the list of elements at positions.
Okay, well, let's say to the elements at positions P1, P2, P3 of list, taking the result
Well, I think it's important to say the list of elements because, right, it's not going to.
The list of elements of position P1 of list.
The head of list.
Yeah. So what did I say before? This is basically reinserting the results back to the same positions. It's a little bit clunkily said. Okay, so let's just look at the other forms here. So the other form is, that's the curried form. And then another form is F. And then we could allow P1 to PP1, P1P, P2 to P2P, or we could allow the same thing. Well, we could allow P1, P2, arrow, P1P, etc. I think we can allow both of those. And that could be a different length list if we wanted to. Mm-hmm. So these ones reinserts back at positions P1P, P2P, etc. Right? Okay, so, and then the other case is arf of F, comma, I1, J1, dot, I2, J2, dot. That one operates on elements I1, J1, etc. of list. Okay, so what is this function? Okay, so we have functions like map.
Filter at?
I don't know why it's filtering. We tried to have a bunch of functions with the word filter in them in connection where we have lots of filters, but they don't mean anything like this. We also have block map, which does something yet different. I mean, block map is mapping on non-overlapping sublists. So, I mean, yes, I agree that the most obvious version would be something like apply at. I mean, the question is, okay, you know, apply at, it's just completely unobvious that apply at, you know, what does it do with the results, basically?
The problem with apply at is that one expects that it's going to be related to apply in the same way that map at is related to map. So it will just apply the head F at those positions.
Okay. So, yeah, that's not good. Okay. So we've got things like rewrite at. I wish that that rewrite had a better sense of applying a function. What are our various other things that apply a function? I mean, there's things like fold, obviously, that apply functions. Let's come back to the modify suggestion for a second, even though I don't like it. We have very little. I just don't see how modify at can help us at all, because it's not really doing that. It's taking this function. See, it would be very good to be able to get the idea that the thing, what does it do? Let's look back at the names that I'd come up with, wherever they were. Okay, so this was an idea that was a way of naming the curried form as a function of some kind.
What about if we see this as rejoining lists?
But it's not really joined because the lists don't have to be, sequential elements.
Yes. I was thinking that we had a list, we split it, and then rejoin it. But yeah.
What about a mutate type thing? Is that too general?
I mean, I like mutate. I mean, there are aspects of it at least that I like. You know, the fact that it, in terms of like genes, it tends not to be the entire, DNA sequence that's getting changed at once. It's,
Yeah, you're right. That's an interesting thing.
To me, it sounds too close to L values and mutability.
Well, the at certainly it doesn't, suggest that it's happening to the thing itself, so to speak, rather than that it is mutating something. I have to say that's the one that least upsets me so far. Mutate at. Is it crazy? I mean, I don't know. If we see something in code that says mutate at, so what we would see is mutate at. That's pretty weird. Sandra is suggesting function at, which was a little bit similar to my. Okay, let's just look at function at for a second. I think that's crazy, because I think you would expect things like formal variables and things inside it and so on.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I think mutate as is the least crazy of these things so far. Yeah, we've had modify at from the live stream. The problem with modify at is it really suggests that it is doing an in-place modification. Mutate might suggest that too, but the word mutate is, you have to be a bit more technical to think that's what it might be doing. Well, in the same family, we have alter and change.
I don't think those are good. I think we're better off with something that sounds a bit more technical.
Or more, at least a bit more abstract.
This will be a useful function. There'll be a bunch of code that can be written quite nicely with this function. And I like, I mean, you'll be able to do things like this, which basically means take those two elements. I don't even know how you do that right now, other than by, you can do that by doing an insert, a replace part. Yeah, that is a replace part. That would be done. The obvious way to do that would be a replace part in expa of 1 arrow f of expa 5, 6. Right?
One more idea. I keep thinking of the relationship with map_at. So if the notation of map_at had in the second argument the rule notation, this could be map_at itself. It's something like it's taking these objects and putting them back in these objects.
Well, that is a very interesting idea. Okay, so let's look at map_at as map_at is today. Okay, so map_at range of 10, and then there's a little bit of screwiness here, right? Because that right. Has the horrible thing of having to do this.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're saying is, if map_at, this is an interesting idea. If map_at, no, it's not right. It's not right. It's not right. It's not right. Because map_at doesn't take them in a full gulp. It takes them one at a time. It's just not the same thing.
Yes, we would have to reinterpret things when we have the rule notation. Or perhaps we can try to solve the two problems at the same time. We invent something that we can put as what could it be? Some wrapper around the list that would interpret already what you want without the additional list.
Yeah, but map is not a multi-gulp. It's not a multi-fish gulp thing. It's just map just goes and looks at subparts of the. It's not a sequence. Not that it is necessarily a sequence, but this is a multi-part.
Well, I've seen users introducing a notation of extended position, which precisely does that. It's specifying kind of a sequence of objects.
A collection of objects, which we already have several list-based things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a bit of what we do with the sequence family.
Right, but the sequence family is all adjacent,
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Yes, I understand. I guess I'm trying to put the function.
Sandra is pointing out if we had a level spec on the applying part of the map, that wouldn't do it, because this is going to take disjoint elements. Look, I like very much the notation here. I'm liking a lot. We just need a name for this thing. It's not incomprehensible.
So I'm going through dictionary lookup of things that start with re. And I'm up to reforge.
Oh boy, now we've got a blacksmith analogy. So the arity of F will match the cardinality at each position given by the position spec. The arity of F, so F is being given. What's going to happen is you're given the things at positions, 2, 6, and 18 or something. And now that's got to return a result R1, R2, R3, which will be reinserted back into positions 2, 6, and 18, except that we're also potentially allowing putting them back in different positions with a different arity. I mean, in principle, we could allow, so these would be, actually, we should call them R2, R6, R18. I mean, one problem, by the way, the at thing is that suggests a particular, resolution of the extract part dichotomy of part numbers, and it would be sort of nice to somehow elide that in this case. Ugh, we are way over time, and we have not solved this problem. Maybe we could try to implement this function under the name mutate at, which I don't think can be its final name. Boy, what should this be called? I think there's something in the re family. And if Brett has finished his, I bet if we... I
meant rejigger now.
It's okay. We can, let's just select, let's see, how do we do this? String take hash, comma 2 equals re. Am I right? I'm getting only verbs here, so it's a lot shorter. Yeah, recollect would be lovely, except that it has a rather different meaning. Reinstate. Boy, there's things which are very close. They're just not right.
Mm-hmm.
Replicate.
Retread.
You're going to end up with rethread next. Boy, this is
retrofit. Interesting.
That's an interesting word, yeah. It's not right. It's just interesting in somehow. All right. What are the other? I mean, the other concept that we have here. what are the other things for? I mean, it's almost like shuffle, except it's not shuffle. It's a, what are words like? It's not because there's expectation that the things are left the same. But it is very common for the.
I mean, and it's not shuffle by.
It's shuffle with.
Yeah.
No, but shuffle by. I see what you're saying. So you're suggesting. I mean, even though the argument order is weird for a by function, that the f is that the presence of the f is like a by.
All right, I'm suggesting shuffle with, right? Because it's not a by, right? You're not using
it isn't a by, unfortunately, unless we extend what by means.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah, it follows map always. Yeah.
I actually kind of like shuffle with.
Why is it shuffling anything? I mean, in the case of the sorting network, it might be shuffling something, but why is it?
Yeah, I guess it's not. You're right. That's not quite right, but it's.
Well, I mean, it depends on if you have the generalized case where you're allowing to say where the results go.
Yeah, and somebody else is pointing out on the live stream that shuffle sounds non-deterministic, which is true. They're horrendously wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I must say that this discussion sounds very similar to the discussion we had months ago on the names of construct. What's the operation of applying, given that we cannot use apply? And I think we are repeating that discussion.
That's basically our problem. Which is why I said reconstruct is almost right, except it's not vararg.
But the fact that it is vararg was an extension just to make it a bit more useful. But the main use of construct is the two argument case.
Okay, so what would you suggest with construct? You're suggesting construct at?
Reconstruct at.
Reconstruct at. That's pretty weird. I mean, reconstruct like it was broken.
Well, I'm just trying to follow the analogy with construct. I mean, if we chose construct.
Well, construct is fine because it's not.
Right. Right. I mean, the problem with construct at, right, is that it then goes back in. Right.
Yes.
On some level, construct at, you would expect to just extract and apply, but not then throw away the rest.
Yes, that's why it's reconstructing an expression after constructing a sub-expression.
I don't know, yeah.
Construct replace, I mean, that's terrible, but.
What's that? Construct in place?
Oh, yeah, that's actually.
Reconstruct using. I don't think using is. I mean, construct. I hate construct in place because it's really not a typical naming convention. But let's see. Does construct in place actually mean the right thing?
Or maybe construct part, like replace part. It's construct part.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Except it doesn't get back. I mean, construct in place. Or maybe there's a more elegant way to say that, but in place is an important idea. Except that in place might suggest mutable data structures, which it does not. Oh boy, these things are always so difficult. So Sandra is asking, what is the distinction between a function that ends with at and a function that ends with part? As in map at, replace part. Well,
yes, well, right. The point is that sort of replace part is not really replacing, right? It's not like a.
it is replacing a part. That's what it does.
No.
I think the difference is that replace part has on the left hand side the position spec or the part of the spec, while replace add, you would expect the expression to be replaced.
Right, replace at would be the thing which allows me to apply, do replace of a particular pattern at positions 2, 5, and 7.
Right.
Which is a function we don't have.
Yes.
Whereas this is replacing the particular part with a new value. It's not rule replace. It's
right. No, replace at would be the equivalent of replace, but with particular. So
exactly.
that would be something like with a pattern, x blank goes to x squared or something at positions 1 and 3.
Exactly.
Or however those are specified. Yeah, we don't have that. I mean, that's another thing we might one day consider, but we don't have that. Let me just after the but that would be a clear thing. We'd know what that's going to be. Oh gosh, this is crazy. Well, I feel a little bit better because I did think about this for a bit when I was trying to invent this function.
Okay, Stephen, I would just like to state that Brett and I have another meeting.
Yeah, I know, and I've gone over a meeting I was supposed to have here, so I really should go. Even though we were just warming up here on the live stream, and we really thank you for that suggestion. And let's see, we should suggest what people. If somebody comes up with a brilliant idea here, where should they send it? I'll tell you what, somebody is going to put an email address in the live stream of where they should send their brilliant suggestion, because we'd really like it. I bet you could send it to suggestions@wolfram.com. And I hope our beautifully tuned bureaucracy after all these 3 decades is such that would actually get to the right place. I think it's a good chance it would. Although nobody on this call has anything to do with what happens to that particular stream. All right, let's try to implement this thing. We'll implement it under the name mutate at, which we don't expect to survive, and have a play with it. Okay. I think we can implement it at top level. So let's see, we have one. Yes, we need a website. Somebody's pointing out on the live stream that we need a voting and submission. I'm not sure if voting is the best idea, but at least a website to send stuff asynchronously from these actual. Actually, you know what? You can add comments to the live stream archives, right? Although I don't know whether the archives show up immediately. Anyway, somebody other than me is going to solve that problem, I hope. All right.
I was going to say, do we have some sort of Twitch emailing list or email address?
I don't know, but we should have something. Maybe we should have a live stream at wolfram.com that simply is for people to make suggestions based on things they see on the live stream.